mean by miracle?
So like my long version of the definition is an unexplainable supernatural event, typically with a beneficial outcome, but that can also depend on from what perspective you're looking at it.
So you don't think there's anything that's unexplainable?
There are questions we haven't answered yet, but to say it was a miracle would be arguing from ignorance.
What do you mean?
Well, to say we don't know what it was, therefore it was a miracle, and we have no idea what miracles, like how miracles actually work or how to prove that something was a miracle. So there's no evidence. An argument from ignorance is when you have no evidence for your claim and you pretend that the fact that some other explanation doesn't work means that like lends points, or what we call in epistemology we can call this credence towards the claim that it was a miracle, but that doesn't really make any sense.
Couldn't there be something that happens that is unknowable by humans? Like something that's so
Yes.
complex that we could never know it. And if something like that happens, couldn't that be considered a miracle?
So, like a miracle in principle can't be understood because it's a supernatural event. There could never be any tool or methodology that uh, that a person that has to operate under, like, we're constrained by natural law and natural forces or whatever. We could never ever ever demonstrate that that's what it was. But there are probably lots of things that we'll never be able to answer, but that doesn't mean therefore it was a miracle. Like so I'm usually talking about like the intervention of a deity, but let's just so magic is no different really than miracles, but we'll just kind of pretend it's different, right? So like let's say, I don't know. There's like a Oh, here's a good one. So like a pandemic happens, or like there's an outbreak, and somebody goes, "Oh, well that was a witch doctor that laid a curse." And let's say, like, we don't know what the plague of Justinian, which might be the worst plague, one of the worst plagues in human history. We don't know what caused it. So if I say it was a voodoo witch doctor, that's an untestable idea. We Science may never actually know what it was, but does that mean that the voodoo witch doctor explanation is a good explanation?
So, so if I can get to our disagreement, maybe is that you think all all events, all everything that happens, if we had enough time and knowledge and skill, it would be explainable by science.
I I believe that that's what the universe we live in is like. I think that miracles are possible, but we have no evidence that any miracle has ever happened.
But I think claiming that they don't happen is just as crazy as claiming that they do, because impossible to know if they happen or not, isn't it?
Well, except we understand, like, the basic physics that undergirds everyday life is basically completely known. Like, it's not ignorant of me to say that we do know how the universe works. Like, there isn't a single observed that doesn't been or that doesn't in principle have some sort of naturalistic cause to it. Do
But
you know what I
that's
mean?
only limiting the universe to our senses and our perception. There's so much beyond, like
Well, you could see a
the spectrum
miracle.
of visible light is like not even like 1%
Yeah, I know.
of
You
the
could
actual
you could
light.
see a miracle, but there'd be no way to know that that's what it was. You'd have to just test a bunch of things and then at the end go, I give up. But that's not positive proof of miracles. That's just
But I'm
other
not
things
but I'm
being
not
done.
claiming that miracles do exist. You're claiming that they don't exist. So that's where you're the burdens of proof is on you because you're saying they don't exist, right?
Yeah, but
I'm
my
saying
claim
they
is
could
backed up by the
exist.
total lack of any good evidence for them. And arguments from ignorance it don't count as evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that my this claim is justified.
So your evidence that there's no miracles is what?
My evidence that there's no miracles is what?
Yeah. What evidence do you have that there's no miracles? Because you're making the claim.
So we live in. Do you disagree that the universe operates according to natural law?
I wouldn't phrase it like that. I would say natural law is a way that we describe the universe. I wouldn't say that it happens according to the natural law. I'd say we describe it. You know,
So
we're
I don't
describing
think
it
natural law
according to
isn't a
natural law.
thing. Yeah, it describes an aspect of the universe,
Hmm.
but I don't see how that's any different than saying the universe. It's how the universe works. Like I'm not saying that natural law controls the universe. It's an aspect of the universe.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
do we
Yeah,
agree
I
on
guess I
that? I'm
agree.
pretty
Yeah, I
sure.
guess just semantically not, but yeah.
Sure. So like we know that to be true.
Mhm.
And like there are all kinds of like you don't believe in voodoo magic, right?
No, but I
Do you believe
don't
in do you
disbelieve
believe in
it.
curses?
I don't disbelieve it 100%. You know, I can't say for sure that it's not real.
Sure, like we can't like I don't think we can have absolute certainty about anything other than our own existence, right? But nobody talks like that. Nobody says, "Well, I'm not 100% sure," but I mean, most of the time nobody talks like that.
When we're doing these kind of debates, I do, but in regular life, no.
Sure. So I don't think voodoo magic is real. I don't think curses are real, right? Um, I don't believe in I don't believe in any mythology. So I would say Christianity is one of those, but there have been infinitely other not infinitely, but huge numbers of other mythologies for like where did the stars come from? Where did humans like Pandora's box? How did like chaos enter the world? Stuff like that. I don't believe any of those, right? I don't believe in the tooth fairy. So there are all kinds of supernatural ideas or hypotheses that have been debunked by rigorous scientific work.
Mhm.
Like people argued for centuries that we must have souls because what actually makes a human being rational, what makes a human being be able to have emotions, what makes their bodies work, and slowly we learned how living what makes life possible, right? So that did away with those as like any need for those things to exist, right? So we know of like we can't even count the number of things that like an appeal to nature, an explanation that deals with physics and chemistry and whatever. There's like a literally uncountable number of things that we have an explanation of that for. But we have no evidence of miracles being the reason anything works. And we've debunked a bunch of similar, like, supernatural claims, right? So, like, my evidence that miracles don't happen is the total absence of any evidence that they happen, is the justification for it. Whereas, to the contrary, like, even if something is, like, something happens and we don't know what it was, assuming it was a miracle, I think is always less rational than assuming there's some sort of rational naturalistic explanation for
What
what
kind of
happened.
thing could be evidence for a miracle? Because it seems like even if something extraordinary happened, you would still claim it's not a miracle. So what kind of thing could happen, or what kind of evidence could exist that would be like, oh, okay, now I there's that's an evidence of a miracle? Because there are things that happen that some people would claim that's an evidence of a miracle, but you would just say, oh, that's
Sure.
unexplained thing.
So how about like the moon splitting in half and then coming back
That
together
wouldn't be a
somehow?
miracle. That would be a catastrophe. That would be pretty bad.
Well, like the Quran says that that happened, right?
Yeah.
So that is a miracle, but I it plainly never happened, right? There's absolutely no evidence that it happened except for the claim that it happened, but that would have been something that everybody in the world would have witnessed, and so they would have talked about it.
Well,
there's no
if we were going to
tradition
go by
anywhere in the world of
witnesses,
the moon splitting. Sorry, what's up?
if we're going to go by witness accounts, then you could say that Jesus coming back from the dead is a miracle because there were witnesses who said it happened.
No, there are claims that witnesses saw it happen.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't be able to, from something so long ago, you wouldn't be able to have an actual witness from then.
Yeah, so it's going to it's going to depend on, like, if you have a claim and we're limited by just the fact that we lose information over time and stuff like that. But for a claim like that, for a claim that he resurrected, we need more than these four books. There's more than four gospels, but a lot of them didn't get included. But we need a lot more than people wrote down in some books many decades later that it happened. Like, that kind of evidence doesn't stack up to the type of claim, because it's an extraordinary claim, but the evidence is really unextraordinary. Like in physics, when physicists are trying to find if there's something new to add to what's called the standard model, like a Higgs boson, they need what's called a sigma 5 confidence interval, I think they call it. And it's basically, it's a statistical mechanism to rule out whether or not what they observed was or was not just due to either random chance or background, like, fuzziness. And sigma 5 means 5 standard deviations. So I believe it's like a 1 in 3.5 million. The odds have to be less than 1 in 3.5 million for them to actually accept it. But we're just talking about some sort of invisible particle that's it's part of the fact of nature. That's pretty awesome. But I would say that that's not more incredible than saying somebody resurrected, because it's literally never happened. We just have, well, except Jesus resurrected a couple people, I believe. But, like, if all the hundreds of like around 100 billion people have ever lived, and like 3 of them resurrected, I need more evidence than just a claim. Sorry, that was really long-winded.
I think it's kind of, we're trying, if miracles are real, I think it's kind of fruitless, because if something exists beyond science and beyond logic, how can we logically debate if it existed or not, right? If something exists outside of logic and science, how can we use science to observe it? It's almost like
You
an
can't.
impossible.
Yeah, you're right. You can't. And so what does that mean? Well, to somebody like me, that means there's no good reason for thinking it happened.
Yeah. Well, that goes on to the next thing you said about faith, right? So because there's no, so the argument for faith that I'll make is that there doesn't have to be any science behind it. If there's a faith that when put into practice, it makes you a better person, then isn't that good for you? Even if it's not anything to do with science or facts, you put that into practice in your life, and you're on a path to become a better person. Is that not valuable?
So in a vacuum, that sounds good, and I don't really argue that people shouldn't have faith, right? But the problem is, faith for explanations of things, then,
You shouldn't lean on faith for explanations of things, right?
well, people do,
You
though. I
lean
mean,
on
they
faith to
lean on
guide
it
you.
for an
You lean on faith to
acceptance
guide you.
of certain truths that they just that's the only way they can reckon with them, right? Like, I have faith in God or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's not how all faith, like, for me, faith is like, you, for some things that you don't know what to do, or it's kind of like, it's hard to explain something like this, but it's for the things that go beyond what we can logically think about. You have faith that.
So like the afterlife would be a perfect example, right? You can the only way somebody would believe that there's life after death is through faith. Okay, so that's we agree. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, right? But what I think, getting back to like what's the problem, it's not necessarily a problem, except for like maybe you know people that do this. Like I know a lot of people that do and say stuff like it's like they deliberately choose to not try to make their own lives better. They just say like, I'm just going to trust in the Lord that he will take care of it for me. And weirdly, these people are the kind of people that say that literally all the time, and literally nothing gets better for a lot of them, right? So it can be harmful, and when you have hundreds of millions of people that sort of think this way collectively, I think that it can stifle human progress. And like to me, it's no secret that you know humans didn't live like if we were to go backwards in time 100 years and look around, we would see or let's do it a different way. If we were to take a human from 100 years ago and teleport them to the present day, they would freak the fuck out, right? And justifiably so. That would also be true. That would pretty much be true if we did that 100 years ago. If it was 1923 and we teleported somebody from 1823 uh, to 1923, they would freak out, but not by as much, right? Not quite by as much. Like there was electricity, uh, and all kinds of things that they probably wouldn't have imagined, and aeromoplanes and whatever,
Yeah.
but it would be less of a freak out. Um, Now, if we did 1723 to 1823, less of a freak out, right? So once we get to like before the scientific age, then you could literally take somebody from 500, like if we took somebody from the year 500 and teleported them to the year 1000, they would look around and be like, yeah, I mean, they built some new stuff, but it's the same,
But it
right?
depends on how far you go back, right? Because we don't know.
Yes,
You
but
know,
but
there
the
could
but the
be
time
somebody
scales
that.
get enormous at this scale. What I'm trying to I haven't made my point yet, and I'm being long winded again. But the point is, I think it's no accident that in the past, when we were far more superstitious, and when we leaned on like people thought that they had answers that they couldn't question. God's the reason the universe does what it does. The or the sun goes around the earth because it was specially created. Stuff like that. I think it's no accident that humanity basically stagnated. The rate at which things changed was unthinkably slow. I think it's no accident that the exact opposite of that happened when when society moved more towards a more scientific, skeptical approach, and when literacy expanded.
Did the ancient Egyptians have faith, you think?
Yeah,
And don't they know things that we still don't know? They knew some things that we still don't know because they
yeah,
can
but
do stuff that we
things
couldn't
that
do.
aren't we don't know precisely how they built the pyramids. But
Yeah.
even if we knew everything about how they built the pyramids, that wouldn't help us live our lives at all. Whereas if they knew even the tiniest bit about how infectious disease works, then that would have changed their lives in
But
unthinkable
that's
ways.
pretty presumptuous of you to know what they knew about infectious disease, right? We don't know that much about ancient Egypt.
I mean, I think we kind of know a lot. We know a lot medicinally too. I have a really good book by about the history of medicine, and the author, he's an actual doctor. He goes through the history of what people practiced in different parts of the world in the past. We actually do know pretty well. I mean, they people just had really dumb ideas about stuff, but they couldn't have known about germs. They didn't have microscopes, you know. They probably knew that like they would have known don't eat food that smells like it's decaying, right? But that's like
But isn't it
self-evident,
possible
you
that
know.
an advanced civilization learned something that we still haven't learned, and they've used that to advance their society in a different way than we have? Like science isn't the only way to advance your society, right?
I don't know what you mean by advance. So what I would say is I don't think humans ever went through more than one industrial revolution. I don't think humans ever went through more than one iron age. Um, and so, I mean, I think that pretty well summarizes it. But what do you mean by advanced? I don't think the internal combustion engine was invented before
Yeah,
Henry
I
Daimler.
don't
I
think
don't
so
remember who
either.
invented it.
But
The internal combustion engine.
there can be, alternate routes that are progressing in a different way,
Nicholas
right?
Otto? Sorry, I was trying to figure out the answer to that question. You said that they can progress in a different way.
Yeah, like
Well,
don't you
yeah, but what
think
what does that what does that
there's
mean though?
don't you think there's spheres of knowledge that as a society we just haven't tapped into yet, right? There's just certain blind spots that we have in in knowledge that we haven't really accessed. Like every few hundred years, it's like, oh, we unlock this thing and it opens up a whole new idea of of study or knowledge. I suspect that in the past, at some time, a civilization had something that we still haven't gone into that sphere of knowledge yet. So there's a blind spot somewhere, and there's probably millions of blind spots that we have if you compare us to like civilizations on other planets.
Well, I don't want to compare us to civilizations on other planets because I don't think that's fair, and we don't know anything about whether or not those civilizations even exist. Not really.
But just
But
to think that there's not any sphere of knowledge that we haven't discovered yet. I think that's
but
crazy.
I still don't know what you mean by that. Like I said, humans never
But how
invented.
could how
Like,
could
okay,
you?
do you think
How could you
computers
know
were
what I mean?
invented?
Because it doesn't exist. Because we don't know about it. It's like trying to
But
talk
there's
to
no
a fish
evidence.
about walking. It's like the fish would never understand.
So I still have no idea what you mean though. Like what does having a new like they under like philosophically they just had a richer understanding of things. They were more in tune with nature and so didn't destroy their environment like we do? Or do you mean like they literally were flying around in crafts?
I I can't say definitively because I don't know what they knew. It's like it's so hard to talk about something that we don't have any base knowledge of, right? It's like Plato's, the thing where the people are looking
Allegory
at
of
the
the cave.
shadows.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like us trying to talk about the real world when we don't. I think there's got to be. I would be sad if we know everything there is to know about the universe, if we know so much. That would be really sad that there's nothing more, like not even
I've
an.
never said that.
No, I'm not saying that you say that, but I think it would be sad to say that there's not another sphere of knowing that we haven't unlocked, and maybe a previous civilization has unlocked it, and our civilization, the way we're going, is going to like eventually everyone is going to be part computer, right? Eventually we're already part computer. I mean, the way we're talking to each other is computer, and it's going more and more that way. So maybe another civilization could lead into a different way. Seems like you're more computer than most now.
Beep. Anyways,
But isn't that possible that there's different roads that we can take to progress, not just a technological road? Or you
I
don't see
don't know
that?
what you mean by that, though. I keep saying this. What do you mean by progress? Like, what does it mean to be advanced? Like, to me, it just means, like, I would measure, I don't think people in the past were dumber than people of the present, but they didn't know as much as we do. They were more ignorant. The total amount of known information about the world was dramatically lower. Now you could make arguments like, well, okay, so like it's true that 3,000 years ago in Greece, there were probably 1 million people whose names we'll never know. But that's not what I mean. I mean about how the universe actually works. I don't mean stuff like that, you know? But I don't know what you mean by advanced and or
So
progress or
that's the
anything.
problem. I'm trying to use terms that we have, but so we could say that a dolphin is more advanced than like a clownfish, right?
So I don't typically talk about I don't
All right,
talk
what would
about
we say?
biology
What are we
in terms like
comparing a
that because that
clownfish and
implies that
intelligence?
that's like a great chain of being argument. It implies that there's some sort of objective biological realism or there's like a better and worse ways to exist, and that doesn't actually make a lot of sense. A dolphin
Okay,
is
so
a more recently so like clownfish. Did you say clownfish?
clownfish, yeah,
Yeah.
Nemo.
So like clownfish, they're they are reef fishes, and reef evolved on this earth a few 100 million years ago, whereas cetaceans, dolphins, evolutionarily are more recent. So sometimes like use words like more like modern and they're more primitive, but
Maybe then
that
intelligent.
doesn't really mean
All right, so
that.
maybe you could increase your intelligence without focusing on science and technology. Maybe that's a better way to say it. So
Okay,
other
that's a
civilizations
really good
grew
argument.
intelligent. They
Yes.
grew in intelligence, but they didn't know about science. They knew about some other thing that we don't know about because we've been too focused over here in this area.
Right. So that's a good argument. Now, I've talked to people who are like really I've talked to really racist people who say things like they'll make claims like when you say Europeans were more advanced and superior to indigenous peoples, that's an incredibly it's first of all it's a gross argument, but it's also like really stupid. And
It's
so like
wrong.
they had different technologies that allowed them to exert more mechanical advantage and move about the world faster and support larger populations and whatever. But they definitely so I'll just give you the argument this way. I was talking with a guy and this was so stupid. So he thought that like indigenous people, like what we would call uncivilized people, weren't as smart. And it's actually probably the exact opposite is the case. So, like, for example, if you or I got dumped into the Amazon rainforest, how long do you think we would make it?
Maybe a week if we're
Probably,
lucky.
right? Yeah, probably a week if we're lucky. Now, we come from the world of high technology, and you and I went to school, and we know more about the way the universe works than they do, but, or than, well, I didn't make the comparison yet, than people who live there do. But we'd be dead in a week, and people have been living there for thousands upon thousands of years. And one of the reasons why their population numbers aren't as high as ours is because A, the environment isn't as friendly, but well, that's the main reason. But it's extremely difficult to live in these places, right? So what that means is, like from a scientific perspective, an evolutionary perspective, natural selection would almost certainly favor people that have greater general intelligence, right? Like think of a game show like Survivor, or it's not really a game show, but those kinds, or like The Amazing Race or whatever, where like you throw people out there, or like Alone is a decent one. It takes a lot of general intelligence, not how much math you know, but like general intelligence, which that's kind of nebulous and hard to define. But if you want to be successful, that's what you have to have. So what I'm trying to get at is indigenous people, nature would almost certainly have favored selection for higher intelligence for them. For us, it's not really the most important thing. So they almost certainly were more intelligent than the typical person. Like,
Because they have to be to survive, and we
yes,
could be. You can, you know, I'm not
yeah.
gonna go
So
too deep into that.
that's an extremely good example of maybe in the like I can agree in the past they understood things maybe differently or better than we do. But they could have actually been more intelligent in some ways, like the average person would have been.
Okay.
But usually when people make claims like this, they're insinuating that they were doing things that we literally couldn't do or can't do. Now that I don't think is the case because I don't see any evidence for it. And
Except, well, the pyramids are evidence for that.
yeah, but there's no evidence that they were using advanced technology. Because
Well,
like
they
if they
line
would
up
have
with
had
the
we
they
we have
line up with
advanced
the stars
technology
on
and we sorry what?
they line up with the stars on Orion's belt, right? So
Well,
that's
that's a toddler could do that though. Anybody can go outside and look at Orion's belt and see it's three dots and they're a little bit crooked. And so stacking rocks in the desert that align with that, there's nothing special about that. It's just like one thing in the shape of another thing.